Good evening, students, especially the students of Honours Third Year, Department of English. Hope you are all doing fine and remaining at home. And as you can see me with my jungly look, my beard, my moustache, my hair, all are at their full liberty except me. I am totally confined at home and not going out because I don't want to infect my family members by going out. And so this is you should not go out and be exposed to coronavirus and thereby infect your family members. So the simple message of the time is remain at home and keep corona outside. Today I am going to give you an outline, a very brief outline of the course called 16th and 17th century poetry. Now, as you know, while designing a syllabus of literature, especially of English literature, two things are taken into consideration. One is the timeline and the other is the genre. And sometimes the two combinedly help to define and design a particular course like this one called 16th and 17th century poetry. You see you have the timeline 16th and 17th century and the genre, very large genre, poetry. And you can have a better understanding if you try to compare it with some other courses of your syllabus, like you have a course called Elizabethan and Jacobean drama, and you have a course called Restoration and 18th century poetry and drama. So everywhere you see the two things are operating, one is the timeline and another is the genre. Now, as I always suggest, and today I would also like to suggest you that whenever you pick a text to study, try to locate it in three settings. One is the time when the writer grew up and developed his own personality, own thoughts of writing, and the time when the particular text is produced, and the time when you as a reader actually reading the text, because you are an academic reader and you have some goals, and one of the goals of you is to discover the relevance of the text with your own time. That is how you agree or differ with what the text is saying or how it has been constructed. Next important thing is that literature is always deeply connected to the political and social history of its own time, and especially the literature which was produced in the 16th and 17th century, they have been greatly influenced by the political issues of their own time. But you should go through the whole lot of English political history, but for the sake of literature you should keep an eye on the important political changes of the 16th and 17th century, especially from King Henry VIII down to 1688, when the Glorious Revolution took place. Now King Henry VIII ascended to the throne of England in 1509, and he was a game-changing ruler actually. With his Reformation Bill, he just liberated England from the clutches of Catholic churches, and the effects of his Reformation Bill had a great impact, had a great influence on the psychological makeup and lifestyle of the people of England of his time. Anyway, after his demise, his son Edward ascended to the throne for a short period of time. Then his daughter Mary ascended to the throne for a few years, and then in 1558 Queen Elizabeth ascended to the throne of England, and that is a turning point in the history of England, which is famously known as the Elizabethan period in English literature, which covers from 1558 to 1603. Now, it would not be an exaggeration to say that Elizabethan period created the base of English literature, and the formal period of English literature starts with this Elizabethan period, where you will have the figures like Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, then Bacon. And in this particular course called 16th and 17th century, you have a poet from this period called Spenser, who belongs to the Elizabethan period. Now, in 1603, when Elizabeth died, then it creates a very turning point in the political history of England, because as you know, the law of inheritance in monarchy is a very difficult mathematics. And mathematics and Queen Elizabeth being unmarried, simply he had no children because of being unmarried. So who to go to the throne? And the mathematics gives the result that it is the King of Scotland, James VI, who is the real heir to the throne of England. Interestingly, Scotland at the time was not an integrated part of England, and as you know, there was a great rivalry between England and Scotland for a long time, because a good number of times England tried to invade Scotland, and Scotland bravely resisted the invasion, and sometimes even Scotland also tried to invade England. And you know the famous story of Robert Bruce, who defeated the England occupation. So, but what happened? It was Henry VII who actually married his daughter Margaret off to the then James IV, who was the King of Scotland, and thus now James VI of Scotland turned to be the great grandson of Henry VII, and turned to be the real heir to the throne of England. So he was invited, and he ascended to the throne in 1603 and became James I of England. He ruled England up to 1625, and his period in literature is known as the Jacobean period. Now after him, his son Charles I ascended to the throne of England in 1625, and the period he ruled is literally known for the period of literature. It is known as the Caroline period. Now the problem with Charles I was that he married a Catholic, and therefore tended to be a little liberal to the Catholics, whereas his parliament was heavily influenced by the Protestants, especially by the Puritans, who tried to clean the Anglican churches from all sort of Catholic characteristics. So there was conflict, and there was other conflict as well, economic conflict. All that led to a civil war in 1642, and the war continued up to 1649, when Charles I was defeated and executed, and the winning party, especially the parliament, now formed a government like the Republic, where they appointed his name is Cromwell as their prime minister. However, after the death of Cromwell, the system failed to continue, and monarchy was restored in 1660 when Charles II ascended to the throne of England again. And now this 1660 is very important because in literature it is known as the Restoration period, which goes up to the end of the 17th century. So finally the 17th century can be divided broadly in two parts, roughly one from 1603 to 1660, which can be also divided in two sub periods. One is the Jacobean period and the other is the Caroline period. And from 1660 to the end of the century 1700, there is a Restoration period. Interestingly, you don't have any poet in this particular course from the Restoration period. Why I am telling later. Now in the syllabus I am talking about, you have some poets whose existence can be traced in long successive three periods, from Elizabethan period to Jacobean period to Caroline period. And this group of poets are famously known as the metaphysical poets. And this metaphysical movement started in 1590 with John Donne and continued up to 1680. But you have only three poets from this particular movement. One is John Donne himself, then Herbert, then Marvell. And in the syllabus you have another great poet whose name is John Milton, who is considered to be as great or next to William Shakespeare in greatness. He is a believer of Puritan faith, and he is a supporter, strong supporter of the Commonwealth government, and so he actually stands uniquely in his own time. So these are the poets you have to study in this particular course called 16th and 17th century poetry. But before I leave, I want to tell something that why restoration period is not included in this course. It may be simply because there is another course which is called Restoration and 18th Century Poetry and Drama, and it can be also that Restoration poetry has its own characteristics which actually totally or can be largely different from the previous type of poetry. And Restoration poetry, especially the poetic branch which was governed by John Dryden, it was actually satire, and that is a totally different genre and very unique genre on its own merit. So that should be another reason why it has been excluded from this particular course and has given place to another course where we have poetry which are basically satire. That may be the case. Anyway, I would like to leave today, and hopefully I will come with my second lecture to give you an introduction about metaphysical poets and metaphysical poetry. So till then, thank you very much. Stay home and keep corona outside. Thank you very much.